Well, it's a legacy is written water for a president who's in office, and particularly for one who's dealing with situations as fluid as Iraq. I mean, clearly, the Bush presidency is defined by Iraq. Right now, it doesn't look very good. If, in some way, they manage to find, remember, Harry Truman didn't leave Korea exactly how he might have liked. He was very unpopular during his second term. His ratings were lower than the current president's. But history has judged that he basically did a difficult thing, and he did it about as well as it could be done. He avoided a wider war. He avoided nuclear war. He lived up to the notion of collective security through the United Nations. He restored the pre-war boundary in Korea. And again, if your policy is not eliminating communism, because that poses too great a cost in the short run, but containing the spread of communism, believing that time is on your side, Truman looks awfully good. Now, this president has clearly decided in almost Wilsonian terms that there is, in fact, an epic clash going on the planet, a clash of cultures that is symbolized by Islamic terrorists who would, if possible, try to destroy our society unless, in the president's view, they are destroyed first. I'm not sure people will debate whether that is an accurate reading of the situation. A lot more people will debate whether going into Iraq furthered that objective. If, for example, against all odds, whether the Iraq Study Group or some other vehicle manages to come up with a formula, perhaps an international conference attended by Syria and Iran, that leads to, in effect, a petitioning of Iraq. What people forget, this is, again, the one thing I would say to presidents, not that they ask my advice, but is Harry Truman was right. You've got to know your history. And the fact is, Iraq is a very artificial country. It was something stitched together by Winston Churchill and others in the wake of the First World War. It's a terrible thing to say that a bloodthirsty dictator kept it under his heel, but, quote, together. But we don't know what the sequel to that chapter in Iraqi history is. But say that there's some way that we can leave the country, that we can get out of Iraq, that it has a reasonable chance to succeed, that it is a self-governing entity, then down the road, I think Bush's decision will look much better than it does right now. The elections and the nature of our politics, well, let me come full circle, because I think, as you know, on Sunday, President Ford set a record. And I often think, he won't be remembered simply for longevity. I think he'll be remembered for the quality of his character and the way he approached politics. There are many of you who remember the 1970s. They were not a quiet decade. We had Vietnam, we had Watergate. People felt very strongly, they were very vocal, they were very strident, there were lots of pointed fingers, there were lots of poison pens. And yet, at the center of it, there was a president who didn't join in the shouting, who didn't demonize his enemies. In fact, who didn't believe he had enemies, simply adversaries and critics. And one thing he'd learned in Congress was an adversary is someone who may be voting against you today, but who might be with you on the next roll call tomorrow. And I think Gerald Ford got from this community, particularly from his family, but from the larger family that is and was Grand Rapids, a profoundly optimistic sense of the human race. He once said that as a young man, he learned always to look for the best in people. And if you do that, you'll find it. And you will be inclined to overlook what is less than the best, which you inevitably are going to run into. And I think if more of our leaders could imbibe just a little bit of that, then I think we could have a more civil discourse, not solving all of our differences, not adjourning our arguments, certainly not forgetting our principles. But I think one thing that could be said of Gerald Ford, and many others, is that he was a patriot before he was a partisan. Thank you very much.